partners are gay, it doesn't actually seem to make much difference in terms of practice. So what are we going to do? If they come to church, they may feel ill at ease, guilty, second-class citizens, or often actually they just ignore the teaching of the church and think that their sexual lives have got nothing to do with those old men wearing strange clothes and lecturing them from the pulpit, as a friend of mine said, 6 foot above contradiction. I think that this creates a profound dilemma for the church. We have actually a beautiful vision of sexual morality. If the family were to disappear as the primary unit of our society, the consequences would be terrible. We have to find ways of promoting our vision of the Christian family so as to have a context for which we can raise our children, another generation. But we have to do it in a way that doesn't trash the relationships that people actually have. If the church is thought of as attacking the fragile, fractured relationships of contemporary society, then we won't be a sign of Christ's unconditional love and acceptance of everybody. And people will feel locked out. How do we resolve this dilemma? Promoting, if you want, a moral vision while accepting anyone who comes to us. And I have to say that I don't know the answer. But one little bit of it is to show, if you want, a beautiful vision of sexual ethics, an attractive presentation, which isn't starting with what you're allowed to do and what you're not allowed to do. A vision which can invite anybody, wherever they are, whatever situation they're in. Someone asked a man by the road, which is the way to Dublin? And he replied, if I wanted to go to Dublin, I wouldn't start here. But for us, it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter what life you've lived. It doesn't matter what messes you've got yourself into. This is where you start on the way home. For me, the starting point of an attractive Christian sexual ethics, and I've written about this in that book on AIDS at some length, is to start with the Eucharist. And Jesus' incredibly beautiful gesture of hope, where he says, this is my body and I give it to you. He gives his body. And that's the ultimate foundation, I think, of any Christian sexual ethics. How do you give your body? How do you say to somebody, this is my body and I give it to you? And Jesus does it with generosity, an unconditional gift. He does it with vulnerability, knowing that he will be hurt. He's placing himself in the hands of his disciples who will not be faithful to him. He does it with fidelity. He gives himself to them forever. And there, I think, you see the absolute foundation for a Christian sexual ethics. That you give yourself in generosity, in vulnerability, and in fidelity. And it's only if you can share with people the sense of that beauty, the beauty of that generous gift, that any sexual ethics will make any sense. That any limits will be comprehensible. If you just try to start with the rules, it would be like trying to persuade somebody of the beauty of baseball simply by reading out the rule book. If you did that, you'd wonder why bother to play. Because cricket would be an even better example, but I don't expect many of you play cricket here at Mashpee. In our society of control, that Enlightenment obsession with morality as constraint, so unchristian, it's very hard to understand that moral vision. When I have sleepless nights, you know, I lie in bed thinking with terror of the time that I had to address 500 Mauritian teenagers on sexual morality while I had flu in French. And for an hour I tried to persuade them of the beauty of a Christian vision of sexuality. And at the end, they all put up their hands and said, am I allowed to sleep with my boyfriend? How many seconds am I allowed to kiss him? Etc. So we have to find ways of sharing a beautiful vision. Finally, and very briefly, because I've gone rather over time, just a very brief word about beauty. The revitalization of Christianity nearly always goes with a new aesthetic. The renewal of Christianity in the 13th century, 12th, 13th century, with the extraordinary beauty of Gregorian chant, Gothic architecture. The Counter-Reformation with the incredible vitality of Baroque art. I can't abide it, but that's irrelevant. Or you see in industrial Britain in the 19th century, the evolution of Methodism, a great explosion of new hymns for a new society. So I think that if Christianity is to flourish in the 21st century, we need to find ways of expressing the beauty of our belief. Why is this? The tree is alive, I said, at its tips, at its branches, at its leaves. Now, often when you think of doctrine, people outside resist Christian doctrine because they assume wrongly that it's doctrinaire, that dogma is dogmatic. They're terrified of our morality because they see it as moralistic. But beauty is what leaps across the boundaries. People will go to church to listen to Bach's St. Matthew Passion. And we will recognize beauty in the compositions of people who are not Christian. In 1 Corinthians, Paul quotes Isaiah, "What no eye has seen, nor ear heard, nor is the heart of anyone conceived, what God has prepared for those who love him." Our hope is for what we cannot say. Aquinas says we are joined to God as to the unknown. But it is in art, in poetry, in painting, and above all in music, that we're able to get a tiny glimpse of what exceeds our words. Sidney Smith, 18th century Anglican clergyman, said, "Heaven is champagne and trumpets." Or 19th century Italian poet Giuseppe Belli wrote, "There is nothing in heaven but violins, laughter, and heaven's bread." I hope he doesn't forget the champagne too. And one little final paradox, which I think is absolutely crucial for Christianity, is that the heart of our faith is an ugly object. A man hanging from a tree. It's an obscene sight. And yet in our faith it is something of beauty. And on Good Friday we sing to the one and only noble tree. When I was in Abingdon near Oxford the other day, I saw a beautiful 14th century representation of the cross as a flowering lily. And there's even a tradition that Jesus was ugly. In the suffering servant of Isaiah, he had no form or comeliness that we should look at him, no beauty that we should desire him. And I get angry at the idea of Jesus being ugly. How could Jesus be ugly? He's the